Welcome to the Welsh Woodman Workshop, and in tonight's project we're going to be making this Dovetail time capsule box. So I've made this box for a local primary school, so they're going to be putting all the items in there and reviewing it in a good few years' time. So it's a Church of England school, so I've got a really cool way of opening this that I'll share later in the video. Step number one, I'm going to cut all my parts to size. I'm doing a rough cut on the compound miter saw, so I'm overcutting slightly just in case anything does slide as it's glued up together, so I can get an accurate size later on. So I'm using Gorilla Glue, so a PVA glue, to glue the wooden boards together, and you'll notice the radial patterns of the grain are opposite, so it's to make it structurally stronger later on. And I really like these parallel clamps by Axminster. These are the professional parallel clamps, and I've noticed a massive difference compared to my sash clamps. One of the major reasons I like them is that you can stack them out of the way in the workshop, and they don't take up much room, and they don't tend to fall over as you're trying to clamp things, which is a really nice sort of feature to have. So I'm going to join these boards now with the plane, get them all nice and flat and level. And I'm going to trim off one end to give it a square edge on all my side panels, and I'm using a stop block then to cut these to my accurate size, so they're all the same. Using the saw again, the table saw, to rip cut my parts to the required height, and I'm going to mark out some dovetails. Now I like marking out my dovetails by hand on the first one, then I'll set up a slide-in bevel gauge to mark out the rest. But I like marking them out hand for the first because it allows me to visualise where the dovetails are going to be and to see if they look proportionally right and aesthetically pleasing, which always helps out to begin with. So I'm just going to shade the areas I'm going to remove, and I'm going to remove the bulk of the area on the bandsaw, so it just speeds things up. But I've still got a lot of chiselling to do to make sure everything's nice and accurately pared down to that scribe line you can see on the board. So after the chiselling, you see the chips in the background. I'm going to now mark this out onto my side pieces. So I'm going to use the tails to mark out the pins of the joint. And for this, I'm using a little scalpel as a marking knife because that gives me a registering point for my chisel later on. I'm going to gauge the thickness of the board. So this line's going to be where I'm going to need to cut down to. I've removed the middle material, and I'm now using a Japanese pull saw to cut these sort of angles in. So I'll cut on the inside of the line so I can pare back with the chisel later on down to that little stop groove. Just using a coping saw to remove these little parts then, and then it'll allow me to get rid of the bulk of the material so I can start paring with the chisel to make sure everything's nice and flat. And I'm going to do a little test fit after a while. I'm going to remove a little tiny bit more using the paring technique to get it fitting nice and accurately. It's got a nice tight joint now with a little bit of persuasion with the mallet, able to get that nice and tightly fitting into place. I'm going to add PVA glue later on again to really improve the strength of this joint. But it's a nice tight fitting, doesn't seem to want to come apart, which is good. So we're going to do that for all four corners and construct the rest of the box then. A little bit of persuasion again with the mallet to get it to come together. Just doing a dry fit, and we'll glue this all together then in the next stage. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be adding a bottom into the box. So notice I've cut two little dado grooves or rebate grooves in the bottom of the box. I'm using that Gorilla Glue again to glue all the way around. So this will make the bottom of the box flush with the bottom, so it won't affect the aesthetics or make the dovetail joints look odd, and it's also going to give a bit more structure to the bottom of the box, so it shouldn't move in the future with this. So just working on the lid, so I've cut the lid to size, routed the edges, and I'm going to glue on an insert panel, so this will help line the lid up a lot easier, and just screwing that into place. So just gauging little lines. The way I'm going to attach this lid is through 4 bolts in the corners, so I can get a nice airtight joint. So I'm going to drill through with a small drill bit on the pillar drill and mark where that needs to go in the box. And to allow the bolts to be sort of sitting flush with the surface, I'm going to use the Forster bit and hammer in a little threaded insert. To brand the box, I thought it'd be a nice idea to use the X-Tools laser cutter to do a little bit of branding with the school logo and the word time capsule laser engraved then underneath, so it's quite fun to see. Lots of sanding later, so sanding through the grits up to 240, and now applying a little bit of a paste wax finish over the top just to accentuate the grain of the pine. So how this opens, I've made a little wood turned cross box so it comes off the top, and I've got a little bolt there in the bottom of the cross, and it uses these bolts and threaded inserts to undo the box, so it's nice and airtight then, so if they were to bury this, it would keep the stuff from inside spoiling. And the cross actually makes quite a nice leverish for opening these. So the box itself I've made from pine, and the wood tin box is a piece of holm oak, so it's a nice dense oak. It's got this really cool little feature in there as well. Loosen all. And all these little bolts then can fit into the box until it's ready to be sort of clamped down. Top. This is the box itself. Thank you ever so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed tonight's video and it's been something a little bit different for you rather than just wood turning. If you would like to see how the cross box is made, or a similar box to this, please let me know in the comments below and I can go through that for you. So if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. That really helps me out in getting more videos like this your way. Thank you ever so much for watching. Hope you have a great night. Diolch yn fawr. Nos da.